essentially they're autonomous. They have everything that they need to do in order to do the work, and they're really focused on delivering that value as quickly as possible. So those are kind of the transformation that we've gone through, at least in my career, for sure. And I think it sets us up to sort of ask the question, how the heck do you do architecture in this world, in this agile world? Do we even need architecture at this point? And what the heck is architecture anyway in this process? So I want to stop there. I mean, how big are the organizations that you work in? I'm kind of curious what size of organizations that we're dealing with.
So at first, we had about 200 people get position
and how do you do architecture? How do you guys think about it? Do you have an architecture team?
So
So you have a board essentially that's reviewing. That's interesting. Okay. Okay. How long does it take you to get to a decision using that process?
Well, from like, I guess the product
yeah. Okay, cool. Anybody else? Any really small companies, 5, 10 people? My question was, what size organization and companies do you guys work for today? 60? Okay. And do you have architects there that you employ? Architect, software architecture? Yeah. And really, honestly, we all are, right? Yeah. I don't personally believe that architects are any different than engineers. It may just be that we're good at facilitating, I hope at least, I hope I'm good at facilitating conversations and evaluating the trade-offs and the decisions that we're making. That might be the one difference in that case, but I think we all have that capability for sure. So I worked in organizations that were really small. My first job right out of school, I worked for a company that was about 150 employees. And that company grew to about 1,200 and then eventually got swallowed up by another company, and we were over 30,000 people. And I, to be honest with you, I absolutely hated working in that company. It was very big. We had an architecture review board. Everything that you did had to go through this architecture review board, and it was very time consuming. We also had some really great groups within that organization, really smart people, but the way the company was split up, they were literally just competing with one another. So it was hard to get collaboration around solutions for the customer. And so I left that company in 2012 and moved to a company here in Columbia, just over across by Williams-Brice, and there were 27 people. I was a 27th employee in that company. So a lot of variation there, a lot of different ways to do architecture. At that company, we started out, we were small enough that we could just get together and talk about things. And we didn't actually go super large over time. We reached 150 people by the time I left, but still, we were able to have conversations because of the relative size, but we did implement this process to go through and recognize that, in order to get stuff out really quickly, we need to remove architects from the equation. They should just be part of the conversation. And we also recognize it was really important for us to get other people to think like architects, essentially. So this was a process that we adopted there. And then when I left there, I moved into the new organization I spoke of earlier. We're implementing the same process within that organization. So cool, very nice. Does anyone here want to make sure, because last week at USC I was surprised by some of the things that they didn't know, and it's just been a long time since I've been a student. So does anyone here not know what an architect does? Feel like we should talk about that. Yeah. So That the term architect really, I think, varies between from person to person, right? Some people think it's a very technical role that maybe they're hands-on and they just know how to code really well. They know how to know design patterns, things like that. Recipes, if you're not unfamiliar with the term design patterns, recipes for how to solve common problems. Um, so you have those types of folks that are architects. I call those. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I, I would, yeah, I would really. I think all those things really kind of fit in that realm. Actually, if there is what I'm really going to be focusing on today is thinking about the impact of the decisions that we're making and why we need to collaborate on those and reach out to folks about that. So if the design of an algorithm or so forth would potentially have an impact on people that might be leveraging that, then I would think it would have an architect that would be involved in that, or at least people thinking from an architect's perspective around that. Does that help? Okay. So there are those folks that think of it as a sort of a technical skill. I know how to build software, that sort of thing. There are architects who think more broadly. I really consider myself to be more of an enterprise architect at this point in my career. I'm really thinking sort of strategic and broad as opposed to down at the level of specific applications. My other role is really just to facilitate the conversations with folks and get them thinking about not just the thing that what I see a lot of times with engineering teams is that they're so focused, and they should be, on the feature that they're building and delivering that they don't actually take a step back for a moment and think about the broad impact of what they're doing, and that there might be other people who also could benefit from the things that they're doing and building and the knowledge that they have and that they're trying to gain. So there's certainly those aspects as well. All right. Well, thanks for the question. That's a great question. Maybe. Yeah. Well, so for me, the relationship between engineering and architecture and the product team is very, very to me. And so uh, I don't really spend a lot of my time today going and talking to customers to understand the things that they're doing from a product perspective. And you could argue that that's the wrong approach. Right? It may not be the right approach in every situation. But I really try to build a strong relationship with the product team to understand the problems that we're trying to solve, and then help our teams to think about creative ways that we can go about solving them. And in some cases, helping them to think about ways that we could do it is by buying something as opposed to building something. Because if we build it, does it really actually give us a competitive advantage? And is it really worth spending 6 months or 9 months or whatever to do it? Can we just go buy it from someone else and then focus on something else that's really going to make us really stand out within the market, right? So does that help? But I will say that I do love talking to people, and I love interacting with users and understanding the problems that they're facing every day. And I think that's one of the most important parts of our job as engineers is doing that, because there's nothing better than hearing firsthand about the problems that our users face. And I'll tell you a quick story. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, one of my first sort of lead roles that I held was I got basically just had this product in my lap. It was a workflow solution. And I was told, hey, I need you to rip this thing off of this other application because it was very tightly coupled to it. We want to be able to use it with any of our applications, and we want to be able to use it within our call center because we were building our own data center and operations center, BPO outsourcing solution or office, I should say, in Fort Worth, Texas. And So I thought, okay, cool. That makes a lot of sense. We can do that. And we did that. Our team was successful at doing that. We put that in place out in the BPO center with our call center folks, and they absolutely hated it. And guess why they hated it? Because we didn't actually go talk to them to ask them, what do you really need? What are the problems that you face on a day-to-day basis? So they were very upset with us. And guess what we did? We traveled to Fort Worth, Texas, and we sat with those folks and we watched them do their work, and we understood the problems that they were trying to solve. And once we saw that, we realized, oh shit, we really didn't know a great solution for these people at all. And we fixed that. And then after that, they loved it. So our job was to replace green screen mainframe solutions. I don't know if anybody remembers those at this point, with GUIs back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And if you watch those people use those applications, I mean, they are incredibly efficient, and they never take their hands off the keyboard in doing the things that they're doing. And that was the thing that they absolutely despise about our application, was they had to reach over, grab the mouse, and move things over. And we didn't give them an efficient user experience for that. So anyway, that was a huge lesson for me as a relatively young software engineer, of the importance of actually interacting with the people that use our software. And today I try to do that through the product team, because I think that they just have more time to do that than I do. But I do love the opportunity when I get a chance to do that. All right, so moving on, we diverse a little bit. So a lot of situations, and it sounds like, Brady, potentially in your situation, you have kind of a centralized architecture. You got an architectural review board around this, and I would argue that this is not necessarily the best way to approach architecture. It undermines the flow of teams. There's a false sense of safety around that process. It limits the growth of engineers within the organization, because those engineers don't get to participate and understand the process of going through. And maybe you guys get some of it just from the fact that you're having to write up with what it is that your proposal in that case, and you have those conversations, but it's not quite the same as actually owning it, being responsible for the decision around that. And then I think it limits creativity, because now it's really just a group of folks that are making those decisions potentially, rather than letting the entire team, the entire organization participate in that process. And so when this is in place, a lot of folks recognize that, okay, this is not the best way for us to do. This isn't going to scale as our organization scales. And by the way, I hear lots of organizations that work that way, and I've worked in those as well. So I'm not picking on you specifically, and I appreciate you offering up your perspective, what you guys do around that. But some, folks try to fix this. So the first thing that they move to is sort of this cross-team architect. So in this case, you've got an architect who's assigned to one or more teams, typically not more than about 3 or 4 teams that they're working with. And so they're just sort of doing round robin, going through with each team, trying to have conversations with them and get them collaborating around the problems. And it is a little better. Get a little bit better flow of decisions, and you have more context in that case, because you're a bit closer to the applications than a bit closer to the teams. But for the architects, it's a lot of context switches that they're going through. And so they don't really have the time that they need to really get involved and understand the problems and understand the software. And I'll tell you, for me at the moment, as I've only been working in ag data now for almost 4 months, and I'm missing a ton of context because I don't really know the applications very deeply. I haven't been in them. I haven't been coding in them, and I haven't been working with those teams. And so I'm not the best person to help them make decisions. I can certainly facilitate the conversations, but I certainly shouldn't be making the decision all entirely on my own at this point. And like the other, it limits the growth of the engineers, because they're still not really getting to own the problem and drive the solution from that perspective. But I also think it limits the growth of the architects. So one of the things that I really enjoy about my job, and that I think most people enjoy, is sharing knowledge and coaching people. And so when the architects are still running around doing this, they don't necessarily get to step back and work on their influencing skills and their ability to state problems in a way that get people to think about them better and look at novel perspectives around that problem. And I do think that it limits the creativity again of the entire organization because you have some siloed responsibilities there. So I was reading through some books recently, and I came across this quote, which I really loved. And I threw this up here if you're interested in checking this book out, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. As I mentioned earlier, I really love to get connected emotionally to the stuff that I'm doing. That's what drives me. That's why I enjoy the work that I do. And this book is really about that. You know, what motivates people. Control leads to compliance, and people will comply. They'll follow the process. They'll do what they're asked to do in most cases. Some people will rebel. But autonomy truly leads to engagement. When you give people the ownership and the autonomy to make decisions, then they're going to get super excited about it and engaged about it, and they're going to make good decisions around that. So we have to trust in what people will do in these situations and give them the ability to do that. So what are we really trying to do? What is it that we desire in this process? In software development today, we really want continuous delivering, cross-functional autonomous teams, right? That's what everybody strives for. This is the Spotify model, essentially. We want a culture of learning. That's really exciting for us to learn and share. I've really enjoyed listening to all of you guys talk about the things that you do and seeing the cool things that you're doing and using today. I've learned a lot just by doing that and observing that. We want the ability to quickly make informed decisions and to safely learn from failures, because we don't want to spend 6 months trying to thoroughly understand everything only to realize that by the time we get to the end of that period, everything changes. Business changes. Business today moves too fast for that. And if you do that, you're going to get left behind. I've been in organizations that had incredible breadth and depth of functionality and applications, but because we were too slow to move, the market just jumped over us with something that was novel and exciting. I spent the first 15 years of my career in insurance, and I worked for a company that had a fantastic insurance solution, but we were slow. And we had these little guys come along, and they were able to do these little point solutions really, really quickly and do it in a novel way that we had never really thought about doing. And they passed us by, and they took over the market, and we went out of business. We have to be really fast at this. And then, of course, collaboration. We seek through this collaboration, we seek broad input into the decisions that we're making, but we're not trying to get to a consensus. And that's one of the big things I think with hierarchical top-down architecture, is that a lot of times you have folks who are really trying to get everybody to consensus or force their opinion or their way on everyone else. And that's probably not the best way. And I have some stories about that. I'll be happy to chat with you a little bit afterwards, but I'm not going to get into those. So what is the solution around this? Well, the solution, as I've been alluding to, is decentralized decision making. It's what we call the advice process. And the way this works is that teams drive and take those decisions. You give them the power to do that. And your architecture team supports that, guide that process, and facilitate that process and facilitate the conversations that need to be to take place. And you're giving them guardrails around this so that they can do this. And you trust that they can do this and that they want to do the right thing around this. So it's architectural advice process. It's really kind of basic. You have one rule: anyone can make an architectural decision, right? But in order to do that, they have to do two things. Those that they have to talk to the people that will be meaningfully impacted by that decision. So if you're planning to change an API, you should probably go talk to the people that are going to be impacted by that API. Or you're planning to deploy something in a different way, you should probably go talk to your DevOps team or your cloud team or what have you about the implications of those. You may want to talk to your security team as well. There may be implications in the way that you change the topology of how you're delivering that. The other thing that you want to do is talk to experts in the area that the decision is being taken. If you know someone that's really good at AWS, probably want to go talk to them a little bit about this platform that you're considering using in that case. Or if you know someone who's really good at security, understands secure software development and understands protocols, OAuth 2 and those kinds of things, you probably want to go talk about that, right? So pretty simple, but but a lot of people get this. I'll tell you, and the biggest mistake that I see is that people don't engage the way that they need to engage. They'll go ask a few people for their thoughts about it, but they'll miss groups. So over time, it takes a little time, a little bit of coaching to go through that to help them understand what they should be doing. So the supporting elements around this process, the first thing is just an openness, a willingness within your organization to use this process, the trust that people will do the right thing and that they'll drive and strive to do that. The second is a decision record. The decision record really facilitates the decision and it facilitates the conversation. Describe the driver and the context around the decision. Describe what it is you're actually trying to do. What's the decision that you want to take? Capture some of the consequences of that decision. And then most importantly, capture the advice that you receive around that decision. You're going to want that because that's going to help you make the best decision. And you want to preserve this, so that later on, if someone comes along and questions, why did you guys do that? You can refer back to it. I can tell you that there's so many times in the things that I do where I would really like to know, why did someone make this decision? Or why did we make this decision? Because it's been so long, I've forgotten why we did it. And it's nice to have these things. Just one note there, like I said, a lot of folks will look at the decision record as just being documentation. They'll document the decision, but they won't actually seek a lot of advice and a lot of conversations around that. So just be mindful and careful of that. The third point is engineering principles. So when you're kind of releasing control, you're giving folks the ability to drive these decisions. You want some guardrails around that process. So you define engineering principles such as we are going to build cloud software. That's just where we're going to build our software, is in the cloud. You could have a principle around that buy versus build decision. If it doesn't actually differentiate us, to give us something that separates us in the market, then we should favor a commercial solution over building it ourselves. Those are the kinds of things that you want to give these folks so that they can drive their decisions. I think that you also want to potentially define an architectural vision. You know, as an organization that you want to be in the cloud, you should create a vision that says this is where we want to be in the cloud. And this is generally how we would like to go about building our software. Maybe it's a microservices-based architecture. Maybe it's an event-driven architecture that we want to use there. So it's okay to state those things. And then the teams could potentially say, well, in this situation, I actually don't think that's the best thing. That's great. Have a conversation about it and see if there's a better way. This other is an advice forum. You can set aside time. Just go ahead and schedule, it's kind of like office hours every week, where you're going to listen to what, these decisions that folks are trying to make, and everyone gets an opportunity to offer advice around that decision. The nice thing about it is that it's a scheduled time, and lots of people can attend. It doesn't have to just be architects or engineers, and it shouldn't just be architects. It could be folks that are responsible for QA. It could be product team members that want to participate in this, because maybe there's a certain user experience that they want to provide, and they have a specific product in mind that they think would solve that problem, or some tooling around that. So there could be lots of folks that are involved in this. And the main thing is to get them involved and to know when they're going to do that. And then I think the last thing is that I don't believe people do enough of is essentially build special interest groups. I consider this to be a special interest group, folks that are just interested in tech and the way that people are doing things, and you get together. And I think doing that sort of thing within an organization is a great thing to do as well. So I'll stop there for a second. I've been doing a lot of talking. Any questions or thoughts? And what's your reaction about this? Are you feeling uneasy? Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's certainly a learning aspect for both groups, right? And someone has to have be open-minded to it and recognize that neither is going to be perfect in the execution to start with, and it's going to take, it's going to be iterative, like everything else that we do. Take a step, we learn from failure, and hopefully that's a relatively quick thing, and then we make some adjustments to do that. Really? Well, I've had this conversation quite a bit, and I look at it as opportunities for them to grow their skill, because now they're not directing people to do things; they're influencing people, and so they've got to brush up on that skill of influence, of stating problems or stating their position in a way that gets people to understand the value of what we're proposing rather than dictating what we're proposing. I also look at it from a coach perspective, because I have, maybe it's just me. I've had these opportunities throughout my life to coach people, coach kids, others, and I love doing that. I love helping people learn something new, and so it's pretty exciting to do that. And I try to have conversations with folks about those opportunities as well. So from the perspective of the architect, that's how I approach it. From the perspective of the team, who may just not really know what it is that they should be doing, it's really more of just that engagement and that positive reinforcement around, this is the thing that we need to think about. It's a process of iterating over, recognize that they're not going to know everything that they need to know initially. And I've had exactly this problem where you introduced it, a team, the first time they have a conversation in an architecture forum, they feel like they get just slammed, bombarded with all of this stuff, like, and they walk away like, wow, I did not even realize all the things that I needed to be thinking about from this perspective. So, but embrace that, realize that that's going to happen, and iterate on it. And over time, they're going to learn. You're building people, you're building decision makers, and you're building architects, but you're doing it across your entire organization rather than within this small group of people that are architects there. It isn't perfect whatsoever, but I do think that it's empowering when you can scale that out and you can feel confident that they are thinking about the right things. Yep. For me, the largest is about 1,000. Yeah, 1,000-person organization. Developers, probably 500 or so, around that. The multiple things going on at the same time. This was 15 years ago, 15 years ago. Multiple at that time. You could sort of think of, we were still in SOA days at that point. Sort of think of them as microservice, like that were contracts, lots of things going on, lots of coordination between folks. Yeah, right, yeah, exactly. And then dependencies, just around that functionality. It I would have loved, the largest organization I worked in was about 32,000 employees. I would have loved to have had something like this in that organization, but it was very, very, very challenging to get that organization to recognize that even just Agile was very, very challenging at that time in that organization. And interestingly enough, I have colleagues who still work there. I should meet with them at some point and talk to them about, well, where are things today? What do you guys do? I know they do Agile because I've seen them published. They've gotten their SAFe certifications and that sort of thing. So they must be doing Agile in some form. It's when I hear SAFe, it's more of, well, okay, of course they're going to be doing SAFe because it's very rigid in its process, right? Yeah. 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 Yeah, the organization that I'm in now is 350 total people, and we have 100-ish It's slightly more than 100 engineers within the organization. So it's we have a lot of coordination that needs to take place. We don't follow safe, but we use Scrum. We use Scrum and Scrum through coordination between teams or dependencies. Yeah, Scrum. Yeah, yeah, and then I'm introducing this process in that organization. They were very much the way Brady described. It's architecture, guiding everything. Sort of bestowing on this is what we're going to do and that sort of thing, and that worked for them as they were kind of evolving over the years. They've been in business for 40 years, and done a fantastic job, by the way. Really impressed with the things that they've accomplished and the things that they've built and the complexity of what they're managing. But they need to scale more and they need to grow more, and we need a process that supports that.
Yeah, like the way they much and they thought they remember we got moving the development that it team the board
Really? Okay. Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
and sometimes the board said we're moving but that now, but they had most of the organizations I've seen did every week.
Yeah. So yeah. The org that I worked in, the 32,000, was sort of like that because I was an architect. My team would produce an architecture for a project that we were going to be implementing. It was interesting at that time. We had a process that was really kind of similar to sort of Shark Tank, where if your BU didn't have the funds to do something, you go and basically propose. Yeah, you pitch this to the corporate office. Yeah, and that was fun. It was a great learning experience for me. I enjoyed doing that at the time. And so there would of course be a technical aspect of what you're pitching. So you have to pitch to the corporate architecture team, review board, and they would make suggestions, recommendations, and things, and then they would give a thumbs up or a thumbs down as to whether or not technically, architecturally, they thought that this was going to be a sound solution. I'll tell you that the company I worked for was the company that built the exchange for Obamacare, and so I was not part of that team. But by the way, they failed in the first implementation, yeah, of the exchange. Yeah, it was. I was glad I was not part of that team. So, but it was interesting, and like I said, I learned a lot from doing that. I really kind of look at all experiences throughout my career. It's really cool learning experiences. I've just had some great opportunities to do some cool things around that. So. So I think that the guilds are the best way to facilitate that because you get people who have that passion about those things. And I try, it's hard sometimes to get those people that are doing those things to get together and do it. But I feel like that's the best way because it's a volunteer activity and the people that are really passionate about it are going to come. And then those people can take it back to their teams and really work it into the way that they're working. And the best example I can have of that is that at this org over here, Columbia that I work for, we had what we had a security guild, and we call them security rangers. And so those folks would get together and talk about security. They would talk about things that were going on that you would see publicized about this exposure, data information disclosure, this security incident. And then they would bring that back. They would have conversations, sort of fireside chat around that. And then they would publish an article and how that related to OWASP Top 10 and secure software development. And then they would also go to teams. And as teams were planning out features, they would be looking and listening. Okay, what could potentially go wrong with this? What are ways that someone can take advantage of what we're building as a malicious actor? And how can we think about it? If we're doing a threat exercise or a security exercise around that, and then they would think about ways that they could adjust that. So this sort of shift left mentality, and we're really trying to inject that knowledge into the teams through the people that are really passionate about it, and hopefully that their passion becomes infectious, and the other people in the team really start to understand it and really get excited about it because they get to participate in it as well. And that we modeled that off of that's the way we thought about quality. There was a point within the work that we were doing that we had this traditional idea about quality being over here, and that's their responsibility because they're just going to test the software. We're just writing. We don't really. It's their job to make sure it's high quality, right? And that model sucked. I can tell you, our software was terrible. But when we realized that quality is everyone's responsibility, and that starts with our understanding of the problem that we're trying to solve, we did a lot better job of that.
Teams for people who are less experienced, who are very eager to learn and to advance. It gives them an opportunity to step into that phase. What happens is the people that you really want participating that feel that this is an obligation that they don't want to be a part of, they get mad about the opportunities that the other people are giving, and it encourages them to also participate.
I do have like contrarian, but I think maybe you have a good answer to this. We've done a lot. Like I would say, my experience, big companies, especially it's always this big drive. We're going to be more active, and what that becomes is like a more bottom level approach. Like we're going to go talk to our employees, capture the feedback. But in a lot of cases, what I feel that ends up being is a way for management to defer their decision making criteria. They're like, well, we decided this. Like everyone decided. So on one hand, like if you're like, let's say you have a simple architecture, right? And your architecture sucks. Well, guess whose fault that's?
Yeah.
Right? I know exactly who to blame. I know we should turn over the employees for. But if I go in and I'm like, well, we've all kind of built this architecture. It's garbage, right? Now whose fault is it, right? Because it wasn't your job, right? And I think that's where, and again, I guess like the decentralized model is very robust.
Yeah.
And that brings certain sort of, we'll call it efficiency, but like when you're trying to optimize something, it's like, well, where was the failure? Right? Is it our ability to communicate? Like, for example, I had the engineering equivalent as a systems engineering, right? For med devices. So I know software, how integrated with electrical engineering, with mechanical engineering. Well, certain people, because I'm a garbage mechanical engineer, you turned up mechanical engineering stuff, that was our mechanical engineer. The integration stuff was my thing, right? And that was in some ways reassuring. It's like, it was like, okay, at least we know when this goes south, where we should be dedicating our resources. Because I think when you have it's sort of assume good acts, right?
It does.
How
you're right.
You get one person who we'll call a troublemaker, right? It's sort of like, whatever, don't have to do my job, right? Literally, on the Fireflies 8 on my summarize suggestions to one thing, and then
but let me ask you this:
yeah.
If everyone owns it and everyone is accountable, then why? I guess my expectation would be that the team is holding that person accountable and saying, "Hey, Fred, why did you do this? Let's talk about this. Help us understand why you decided to do this way." Or Fred, why aren't you participating in this?
And I think,
but I have other thoughts too. But
and I think that I'm on the bad inspection. Something we do is bad, right? It's my fault. Like I suck. But I definitely have been, like, I would say there was a lot of feedback in the last organization that or IT is doing great. And like my feedback consistently, because I'm overreacting to things, like who's fired ahead of the director of IT, right? Just started off and start whittling out the down until this thing's fixed. I don't think that was fair either. It was just like, But it was sort of hard to nail down. It was like, oh, geez,
Yeah.
we all did have a, and we all did have the same thing, right? Sometimes that was great. I love that ability to start going and asking engineers, how do we do this? But it did become, I thought, in my opinion, right, a way for upper management, but for like,
Yeah.
we all did this. You know, well, we all did it. I don't know if you had that experience.
That's a great idea, by the way.
Huh?
That's a great idea.
Did you just?
Fire the CEO.
I've seen her do that in her factory. That was his advice. Like, when we started running this factory, they were like, how did I cut employees? But I fire 500 people every week. I'm going to keep doing it until I feel it. Like, so I started noticing people are gone. We're just going to keep doing it. I don't, there's so many things said before about that, but I did think that, yeah, it sort of was like, yeah, that was always my frustration with it. Even as the guys in the circle,
Yeah.
we should be agile. We should be where we specialize.
I have two thoughts.
Absolutely.
First, I'm going to say that I generally find that a lot of folks don't like to have those crucial conversations, right? They don't like conflict, and they don't like holding people accountable. As someone in my role as a leader within the engineering organization, I'm looking to make sure that teams have people who are comfortable with doing that. And if I don't see it, then I'm talking to them. I'm coaching the people that I think should be doing to make sure that they are doing that and that they get comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't work if everyone's just complacent and they don't want to step out of their lane and have those conversations, right?
Yeah.
Because it really is, you have to act like an adult. And we are running a business, and have this conversation too. Like, this is a business. We have to we produce something and we have to get it to market. Otherwise, the market is going to pass us by very quickly.
I'll even like for myself. I've been on the other side, right? Because I'm such a wild guy, right? Where I had a conversation with senior guy, they're like, yes, we've gone to the section where, you know, giving feedback. Your feedback needs to be around all so many people who you are.
Yeah.
Right? You're really just making decisions like what he's fired, who he fired before. So, and I think that's, you know, that was, especially early on, really good feedback. You know, making sure that get off that idea that it didn't get drowned out because I know what people do.
Yeah, I have to be careful of that as well, because I am the kind of person that speaks. I'm very opinionated, and I speak what I think we should be doing. And I've been coached to, hey, Jamie, you need to be quiet for a bit and just let other people talk. So I have to work on that constantly.
Yeah. No, I think I don't think it really wants, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, you have to want to process the work, everything.
The last thing I'll say about that is the way I look at it. I generally try to blame myself first. What did I not do well in facilitating the conversation to help with that? Or how did I not participate in the right way to help that team be successful with that? I'm not always perfect at that. I'll admit that. But that's generally how I look at things.
Yeah.
And I think if you have people like that are willing to take some of that responsibility, it is my responsibility ultimately to make sure that we're following a sound architecture. We're building something that's going to be sound. So as we're having conversations, so once the decision's been made and now we're in implementation, then I'm observing what's going on there and I'm asking questions about, okay, do we understand the performance goals of this? And do we understand how much traffic we can handle at a peak rate? And are we designing it to be resilient? This kind of thing. So I think
you're not as the sole decision maker, but there is an ownership role still, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if this process fails, then I should be accountable for it.
Right? I know that's not me, right?
That's not me. That's exactly. I mean, that's accountability, right?
I think that's a really good thing to highlight too. It's like, look, just because you're not in charge of every single decision or input that went into this, doesn't mean you have ownership.
Right.
Just that you were, you had an environment conducive to collecting philosophy.
Yep.
Which obviously, like, you're a super stellar guy. It doesn't work.
Lots of people will disagree with that, but hopefully a few that agree.
We're on the Silicon Swamp. You're our favorite person this week. Whoever's talking is the best person I've ever met. That could, by the way, listen, that could just email me.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Yeah, cool. Well, I think that the other thing for me, I said sort of the transformation I've gone through in my career is realizing that there was a time where I was focused just on, I just wanted to be the best engineer I could be. And I thought that that's how I was going to help people be successful. But I looked at the world through engineer blinders, and I didn't recognize how the decisions that I was making were impacting others and the team's ability to be successful. And as an architect, I didn't really think about how my architecture, my choices were affecting the team's ability to even produce the kind of velocity that we were trying to achieve as an organization. So what I'm now trying to do is to get the teams I work with to understand the implications of that, because what's most important for me is the dev flow and the ability for people to work and to do things very quickly, to have some satisfaction in doing that process and to get that software out to the organization, out to the user. The most frustrating thing for me is it takes us 6 months to get something released. That's just crazy. It's too long in this world that we're in today. All right, so how are we doing on time? I'm taking a long time. I apologize. Just a few things I'll run through really quickly. The elements, just diving into a little bit more detail. The decision record. This is a general template for what this looks like. The things you would expect, the title of the decision, just something that you can very easily recognize what that is, the status. Ultimately, you record the decision. Most important part, really the drivers and context, the consequences of the decision, and then the advice that you're actually receiving. Make sure you get that documented and include it in your decision record. And there are lots of templates, different templates online for this kind of thing. Tailor it to what you think. We used to include options in our decision records. I don't think that's all that important today. We don't do that where I am today. But the other important element are engineering principles. These guide the work, help guide the decisions. It's a nice tool for introducing new engineers to the organization. They better understand how we work and how we think. I think the really cool thing too is that it helps others that aren't engineers really understand why we make the decisions that we make. And I told you, that relationship with the product team. Sometimes that relationship can be a little abrasive, right? You don't agree with the product team always in some situations, and I think it's really important for them to understand why we're saying no to that, and we think this is a better way or a better decision around this. And just to give you some examples, I mentioned the build differentiators. We want to design with an eye toward evolution, evolving our solution over time, and we really want to try to keep things small and simple. We don't need to build big things or design to meet every possible type of combination of feature or data or whatever it may be. Let's just kind of think small and evolve from there. I do think the architectural vision, as I mentioned earlier, is an important part. Just let people kind of know generally where you're trying to go. What's the compass for your organization? Company ago that I was in, we evolved from on-prem deployments to the cloud, and it was very clear: we're cloud. We're going to move cloud. Everything we think about should be cloud. We really shouldn't think about anything that's going to be on-prem. I do think the advice forums are really a cool way to have conversations. It forces people into that time slot. They know when they can come and talk. And so you get more people participating. Outside of doing this, you're going to get little side conversations that happen. And the side conversations, that's great that folks are seeking advice from different folks, but then the other people don't get to hear the advice. And so it takes longer for that knowledge to transfer through the organization when you don't do that. Yep. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. That's a fantastic suggestion. Just a thought that occurs to me as somebody who's in a leadership position. You know, I recognize that people don't always want to say things critical to me, right? Your process sucks, Jamie. Can we change it? And that's a great way to give them an opportunity to say that in a way that it's actionable and they feel safe and comfortable with that. Yeah, cool, great suggestion. And then I mentioned things earlier. I love this. I love just being able to come and listen to you guys talk about stuff. It's just been fun for me to hear that, and I'm working hard to try to get this going in the organization that I'm in now because I think it's such a powerful tool for us. And just a couple of examples there. Done the security thing. I think UI UX is another great SIG to have as well within an organization. Lots of passion. I see oftentimes that UX is a bottleneck in organizations, and I don't think it should be. And I think it's something that you can very easily spread that knowledge through conversations in a process similar to this. And then, of course, the tech, all the cool stuff that you guys have been talking about recently with AI. Those are great ways to get people just excited about this. And 30 years in, I still love what I do. And that's what I love about it is it changes so frequently, and we get to learn new stuff and cool stuff around that. Common question is, what should we be seeking decisions on? Just to give you an idea, structure, architecture, whether you're doing microservice architecture, event-driven architecture, could be, a micro front end. Are you making a decision about a micro front end? And you might say, well, how does that impact other people? But a micro front end impacts other people because you might have different parts of your application built by different teams. And if you're going to switch to a micro front end, then obviously that's going to impact them. You want them to be able to participate in that. Cross-functional characteristics, like things like logging. Maybe there's a specific logging format that you're going to use that because you want it to be ingested into Serialog or Azure, Insights, Analytics, and Datadog, things like that. You want a common framework for that sort of thing. Dependencies, it could be that you're choosing to use maybe Elastic as opposed to, Cosmos DB or something like that. Those kinds of choices or some other API. Obviously, APIs themselves, data contracts, anything that a contract that someone else would be dependent upon, if you're going to change it or if you're proposing something new, you should probably be having conversations about that. And then construction techniques, different ways of composing applications and the act of actually building them as well. Not so much process, so definitely not things like, the choice of whether to use Agile or safe or those kinds of things. That's more operational in nature. It's really not the point of this, although you should probably have some conversations about that too. A few anti-patterns to bring up. One is that I commonly see folks that just don't seek advice at all. They just use the decision record as a way to document something, and they just completely fail to seek advice. Or they may not seek a broad enough advice. They talk to one or two people, and they feel like, well, I'm done. I talked to some folks. That's what I had to do, right? And like, well, no, you should talk to everyone that's impacted by the decision, and then at least one expert in the decision in that case. And that really serves the purpose of, if they have a lot of folks that need to talk to, it might make them think twice about the way that they're going to approach solving the problem. And in this iterative world where we're really trying to get things out really quickly, it might cause them to think a little smaller and a little more iteratively about the solution. So it's a nice consequence of that. Striving for consensus. Oftentimes when you introduce this process and you've had this ivory tower kind of architecture or this board in place, they think that you're still trying to seek consensus, but you're not trying to seek consensus with this process. You're trying to inform it and get a much broader input into the decision. So watch out for that. People that just use it as a documentation tool, it's really not just meant for that. That just happens to be a side effect of the thing that you're doing. Expecting perfection, you're not going to be perfect. I mean, I'll be honest with you, everything I've done in my entire career, I don't think a single thing has been done perfectly. I think as humans, we have flaws and we make mistakes. the idea is to just quickly, hopefully quickly learn from those and adjust and pivot from that. And then this last one I think is a really big one, especially if you're going from a board, is shadow architecture. So I participated in the process. I heard all the sides, and then after the meeting, I walked it over. Chuck, I think you should. So I'm circumventing the process, making that Chuck feel uncomfortable because I just said, Chuck, I think you should do it this way. Ignore everything else you heard in that meeting. So be careful of those kinds of things. So just kind of closing up here, the outcome of this is hopefully greater collaboration and knowledge sharing. I think probably one of the biggest wins, just the engagement. And despite what Fred was trying to say earlier, I think you get some ownership out of this. He was trying to sabotage my entire presentation. I'm just here to help you out, man.
Yeah.
Fill a week. Hopefully you build more decision takers and you get people to think more about the kinds of things that you think about from an architectural perspective. I think you will get better decisions overall. I've seen that. You might even get some smaller decisions because it's a lot of work to talk to people. But this process shouldn't be a lot of work. And then hopefully you get to faster flow, which is the thing that I think is really cool about this and what we should all be striving for today, is helping our teams just move really quickly. So recommended reading for you. So this is not my idea whatsoever. This great person, Andrew Harmel Law, first published an article on Mark Fowler some years ago now around scaling the practice of architecture conversationally. Just a couple of months ago, he actually released a book, so facilitating software architecture. A lot more detail in the book, so check it out, and hopefully, give him some money for sharing his knowledge with us and give me the ability to share it with you as well. Oh yeah, you guys have seen that, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, that's not him. That's me, right? Had to throw that in there. Yeah, and if you still want to connect after all this, and after the Tiger Hall, you can do that. So I did this last week at USC, and I don't think those guys really. I don't think they really took the joke there. I was just I have a split family between USC and Clemson. Some folks that attended USC. My wife happens to have a master's degree from USC, by the way. So, but I told my aunt is a big alumni, USC alumni, and I told her, I was like, I'm going to do this thing with these students at USC, and I'm thinking about wearing an orange shirt. And she's like, do not wear an orange shirt. It's like, well, come on, it'd be so funny just to go in and walk in with an orange shirt. So I wore neutral colors, but I did have to throw this up there. They did get the joke for sure. All right, well, thank you. Any questions? Thanks for the questions during the session. I appreciate that.
No, I thought that's where we're going, but then there would be questions. I'm sorry. Question.
Is there anybody online?
Yeah, people online.
Okay.
Because all fragile. So we handle that. We already
All right, cool. Well, thank you.
I'm not. I'm not. I'm gonna take that clip and just like send it to him.
So who's lined up? Are we like? Do we really have gaps?
Yeah, the next couple of weeks.